The Kansas City Chiefs have gotten off to their worst start in the Patrick Mahomes era, as they currently sit at 1-2 and in last place in the AFC West division. In this video, we're going to discuss, is the Chiefs dynasty really over already, or are people overreacting? Now let's get into the video. Now, I can't lie, people are definitely overreacting, and this video in general is an overreaction. We're only 3 weeks into the season, and people are starting to say that the Kansas City Chiefs have fallen off because they're 1-2, when realistically, 1-2 is not the start you want, but football in September is much different than football in December and January and February, even when the Super Bowl happens. And the Kansas City Chiefs have a lot of experience now playing later into the year, and I'm not giving them excuses. However, them losing the last 2 weeks to the Ravens and the Chargers shouldn't be a cause for worry, or even saying that the Chiefs dynasty is already over, because they've lost 2 games, and 2 close games nonetheless. Now, we go week by week, in week 1 they played against the Cleveland Browns, and they ended up edging out the Browns 33-29, and it was an extremely, extremely close game where Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield really dueled it out, with both of them having over 300 yards. Patrick Mahomes throwing for 3 touchdowns. Baker Mayfield didn't have any touchdowns, but the Browns team is designed to have a great running game, so that's really where they scored their touchdowns. But it was a really close game. It came down to the fourth quarter, and the Chiefs really had to step it up in the second half. They were losing at halftime, and then they outscored the Browns in the second half 23-7 to end up winning the game, and 13 points in the fourth quarter. So that really propelled them to that victory. But right off the bat, we were able to see that they weren't as dominant as we've seen the Chiefs have passed. However, I think the Cleveland Browns are a really good challenge for them. I think the Cleveland Browns have a lot of talent on that team and probably match up the best to Kansas City, better than any other team in the AFC conference does currently. There's definitely some challengers like the Bills and stuff, but I think the Browns are definitely the most talented team behind the Chiefs. And then we go to Sunday Night Football in Week 2. It was the Chiefs versus Ravens. People were not expecting the Ravens to do much after their Week 1 loss to the Raiders. And the Chiefs were up in that game. It actually looked really good for the Chiefs for a majority of that game. They were playing really well. They were winning at halftime. And then the third quarter, they were able to have a really good third quarter. And in the fourth quarter, it seemed like the Chiefs were going to win. But then something flipped on Lamar Jackson's head. You could actually see it on the field. He was locked in. He was ready to make some plays. So that was unfortunate for the Kansas City Chiefs, because they played well that game. It was just Lamar Jackson decided that he didn't want to lose another Sunday Night Football game. And despite throwing 2 interceptions for Lamar Jackson and throwing a touchdown, the Ravens scoring 12 unanswered points in the fourth quarter propelled them to a victory over the Kansas City Chiefs 36-35. I think people kind of devalue this loss by the Chiefs just because the Chiefs are supposed to be a great team, and the Ravens have so many injuries right now that people were saying that the Ravens aren't a good team, even though we forget that they have an MVP at quarterback, just like the Chiefs do. And that team has been good for the last decade, probably even before Lamar Jackson's there. That team's just been a constant winner. So I feel like we can't really blame the Chiefs too much for losing this game, and I don't think that it's not like they lost to the Jaguars or the Jets or a bad team like that. They lost to a really good team in a really close game where they probably should have won realistically, but they lost the game in the fourth quarter. The Ravens outplayed them in the fourth quarter. It just seemed like the Ravens wanted it a little bit more. So there's Week 2. And then we look at Week 3. The Kansas City Chiefs played their division rival, the Los Angeles Chargers, who have Justin Herbert and have looked really good this year, actually, and even looked really good at the end of last season. They got a new coach that's probably better fit for this team. I think he's a better coach than Anthony Lynn. And Brandon Staley, the current Chargers coach, he's really trying to instill some new ideologies within that organization. So the Chargers are playing really good this year, and it's a division rival, so it's always going to be a hard game. People, I think, underestimate how hard division games are. I'm a Jets fan, and I know it hasn't looked like it for the past few years, but, for example, even in, 2015, when the Patriots were still significantly better than the Jets, those Jets-Patriots games were always close because those teams play each other so much, so you start to learn those teams' tendencies. You know the players on the team really well. You see them twice a year. So I don't think that's a bad loss again for the Chiefs against the Chargers. The Chargers are a good team. It's a division rival. The Chiefs were at home, which kind of stinks for that. But again, it was a close game. Patrick Mahomes did not have a great game, to be honest. He threw 2 interceptions, but he had 3 touchdowns. The interception at the end of the game gave the Los Angeles Chargers pretty good field position at the end of the fourth quarter, and they were able to go score a touchdown to win the game. And again, it was the fourth quarter that the Chiefs kind of blew the loss. They had a 14-3 lead at halftime. Or the Chargers, I'm sorry, had a 14-3 lead at halftime. And then the Chiefs had a really good third quarter to bring the game back. They were winning at the end of the third quarter, 17-14. They held the Chargers scoreless in the third quarter. And then the fourth quarter comes and the Chargers scored 16 points opposed to the Chiefs 7. So again, it was another game that came down to the fourth quarter and the Chiefs just weren't able to pull it out, which is fine because the Chiefs added a lot of new players, which I think people forget. Patrick Mahomes, we saw last year in the Super Bowl, was running for his life play after play because the offensive line was absolutely abysmal. The Chiefs really understood how important it was to keep Patrick Mahomes upright, and because you could see that he can't do everything when there's no offensive line. He can't beat Patrick Mahomes when there's no offensive line. We saw that. So the Chiefs made a really strong push to make a play or to make an improvement on the offensive line, and they completely revamped that offensive line. Completely revamped it. It's basically a brand new offensive line. It takes time for an offensive line to gel. Some people don't realize that. They think you could just throw 5 great players on the offensive line and they'll be fine. They'll figure it out eventually, of course, but at first they're not going to be good. It's just how way offensive line works. The offensive line is like a team in itself because there's so many stunts and switches that the defensive line and linebackers will make to try to confuse the offensive line. They have to work as a unit and understand each other's tendencies in order for the offensive line to work the way it's supposed to. It's a really hard thing, and I think a lot of fans are just like, when players are coming through, shooting through gaps and stuff, they're like, oh, the offensive line stinks. And it's like, yeah, you can say that. When the quarterback's under constant pressure, the offensive line does stink. But it takes time to develop that chemistry. So I think the Chiefs right now, they made the moves they needed to, and we're going to see these struggles in the beginning of the season while that offensive line learns each other's tendencies and just become, a cohesive unit together. I think as the season progresses, we'll see them get better. We'll see the Chiefs' offense in general just continue to improve because Patrick Mahomes already has, familiar receivers. He has Travis Kelce at tight end. The running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, has struggled with fumbles this season so far, but again, he was in the offense last year. He's getting more comfortable. So I would say that don't worry about the Chiefs' offense. It's going to take time for that offensive line. It's going to take time for that offensive line to gel, and as that happens, you'll see the Chiefs' offense just steadily get better. And it's not like they're struggling to put points on the board, because that's not true at all. They scored over 30 points in both of their first 2 games, and they scored 24 in their third game. It's not like they're going out here scoring 13 points or like what happened to the Chiefs of old. That's not the case at all. The Chiefs' defense has struggled mightily this year. A lot of Chiefs fans are calling for Steven Spagnuolo's head. He's the current defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. He's actually been there for a lot of years now, I would say. He was a former Giants defensive coordinator, I believe. I could see the concern with the Chiefs' defense. Just like how the Chargers have scored over 30 points in 2 of their games, they've given up 30 points in one game and gave up 29 and 24 points in other games, and the defense is really struggling. However, they have some key injuries. For the first week, they didn't even have Tyrann Mathieu, and he's a huge key piece to that defense. You saw how much of a difference he made in the Ravens game. I'm pretty sure he had both interceptions on Lamar Jackson that game. He's a key part of that defense, and they'll get there, I think. Maybe Steve Spagnuolo has not looked great, but again, I think you just got to give the Chiefs time. The defense really hasn't changed too much, to be honest. I can't really think of an excuse to give the defense how I can the offense and the offensive line. The Chiefs defense has some new players, but it's basically the same thing. They haven't had a standout cornerback in the Patrick Mahomes era. I mean, the last one they probably had was Marcus Peters when he was very young, and then they ended up trading him. And that's really all I would say for the defense. I don't think there's a great defensive player on that team. I mean, obviously they have Chris Jones, who's probably their best defensive lineman. But that's really it. And Daniel Sorensen, I think a lot of people overhype him. I don't think he's really as impactful. I think he's a really solid linebacker for them, but he's not a player that's up to the standard of like a Patrick Queen in his second year, who's looked really good. But that defense overall has just like, it's not great, but it has good players. It should be playing much better than it is right now. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people are saying that the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty is over after 3 weeks into the NFL season. We've seen the Patriots, and I have to compare the Chiefs to the Patriots because it's the most similar team that we've ever seen to the Patriots dynasty because of they've been in the Super Bowl for 2 straight years, winning one of those Super Bowls. And we expect them to be able to make deep playoff runs for years to come because of that core group that they have with Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman. There's so many players on that offense that just seem like it's going to be the next dynasty in the NFL. Again, we don't know if that could happen. It's really hard to predict a dynasty. You can't really expect it to happen. But let's compare them real quick to the Patriots of the last 20 years. The Patriots were a team that, had some off years, and there's a big gap. I think people forget this. Let's look at Tom Brady when he first came into the NFL. He started winning right away. I mean, that Patriots team was really good. It was well coached. Tom Brady was a young player. He made some mistakes, but overall, they win some Super Bowls early in his career. And then there's a big gap between the next Super Bowl that the Patriots win. I got to look this up real quick because I don't know the exact years. But there's a pretty large gap between when the Patriots were winning Super Bowls from the first Super Bowl to the last. Yeah, here it is. The Patriots went 10 years without winning a Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl in 2002, Tom Brady. 2004, Tom Brady. All these were with Tom Brady, so I'm not even going to say that. They won the Super Bowl in 2002, 2004, 2005. And then there's a 10-year gap from when they win their next Super Bowl in 2015 against the Seahawks. I think it was against the Seahawks. I might be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure. There's a big gap. And that's because it's really hard to win in the NFL, and I think people are doubting or like making it seem too easy. That the 20-year run that the Patriots had. I mean, of course, there were some Super Bowl trips that the Patriots had in there that they ended up losing, but to win the Super Bowl is really hard. And how many times have we seen the New England Patriots throughout? I mean, the perfect example is, what was it, like 4 or 5 years ago, the Patriots played the Kansas City Chiefs on a Monday night. This was before Patrick Mahomes was even the quarterback, and the Patriots got blown out like 42-3 or something, or 52-3. It was something like that. I forget what the exact score was. And we heard all the noise that Tom Brady's career was over. Bill Belichick's career was over. The Patriots dynasty is finally over. The Patriots ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. It doesn't matter how you start. We hear Bill Belichick say it before. We've heard Bill Belichick say this before. It's not about how you're playing football in September. It's about how you're playing football in December, because there's a difference between how your team looks right now and how your team's going to look then. You're going to have those up and down battles. You're going to have highs. You're going to have lows. It's all about how your team responds throughout the season. Right now, the Chiefs are starting out on a low, similar to how the Patriots did some years. It doesn't mean the Chiefs are going to be a bad football team or mediocre football team in December. They're 1-2 right now. For all we know, they could be 15-2 at the end of the season. It'll be like, what were we talking about in week 3? We really don't know. Now, the Chiefs are in a much harder division this year. The teams in the Chargers, the Raiders, and even the Broncos seem like they're much stronger teams than previous years. Just like I said, with the Chargers, they have Justin Herbert. The Raiders are off to a really hot start, also being undefeated at 3-0 right now. And then there's the Broncos, who are also 3-0, but they have we've talked about them in one of the other videos. I'll link that in the description below if you want to watch it, what I think about the Broncos. But it's a much stronger division this year. It's going to be more challenging for the Chiefs. We may not see those crazy regular season records that they've had of the past few years because of the division being harder. That happens some years. It's what happens in the NFL. Sometimes teams are stronger than they usually are. I mean, we saw with the Patriots when the Jets had those 2 AFC championship runs. The Patriots actually did win the division those 2 years, but their record those 2 years was significantly worse than when they were, going to the Super Bowl in 2015 and 2017 when the Bills, the Jets, and the Dolphins were terrible teams. The Patriots' record looked good because they pretty much had 6 free wins in their division. So the Chiefs might not have that great regular season record, but again, it doesn't matter as long as they get to the playoffs, which, let's be honest, I think we could all pretty much say the Chiefs are going to make the playoffs still. The Chiefs, despite starting off 1-2, still have the highest odds in the division currently to win the division, which is just crazy to think about because, you know, they're currently 1-2. They're sitting at the bottom. Two of the teams are undefeated. But the Chiefs, because everyone knows that the dynasty is not over yet and people are just overreacting, they still have the highest odds, or the lowest odds, I would say, the worst odds. I don't know how to phrase this. I'm getting a little lost with myself, but the Chiefs are still favored to win their division in all the sports books and everything. And I think that's a telltale sign of what this Chiefs team is going to do for the rest of the season. Let me know what you guys think about the Chiefs. Do you think people are overreacting, or do you think the Chiefs are going to take a significant step back this year? I would love to see what you guys think in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, comment, and I hope you guys have a great day.